Well, once again, it's so good to see all of you here today. As I look out over the audience, the crowd, it's so good to see so many familiar faces, those of you who faithfully attend Brookhaven, it's good to have you worshiping with us today. For those of you who are guests or visitors, thank you for worshiping with us today. We hope that you find Brookhaven to be a place where you experience maybe a connection to God that you've never experienced before. Something I was supposed to mention at the offering time, especially if you're a guest or you're a visitor, we would love for you to fill out communication cards. And I know the offering has already been received, but you can hand those to one of the pastors or someone who just looks like they go here, if you don't mind handing it to them. And they will get it to us. And so we'd love to communicate with those. That's primarily what these are for, is for communications, for prayer concerns. Every once in a while, someone has just a question or concern that they express on these. And if I could just get you to do me a favor, if you could just sign your name to those. There's been a couple that I would love to have responded to, but there were no names on them. And so I wasn't able to get back with you. So I apologize about that. But if you could sign your name to it, that would be great. Please don't judge me. I hope you guys don't judge me, but I've always been sort of a sucker for people who can do illusionist tricks. I would love to be able to bring someone up here and do some really cool card trick or pull a rabbit out of a hat or something. But I have none of those skills, but I've always been sort of amused by those. I know that they're sleight of hand and they're all like a mind game. But when I see the things happening, I'm like, what just happened? I have no idea what just happened, but whatever it was really cool. And I would like for you to do that again. And so it's just been a thing. I always like that. If you ever watch YouTube videos of some of these individuals that are really good, guys and girls who are really good, they'll go out on the street and the people who are seeing them right there, right in front of them, are just amazed. They have no idea what just happened to them. In fact, recently there was a couple of movies that came out. Now You See Me 1 and Now You See Me 2. I hope they stop there, because if you know anything about movies, after about 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, they've jumped the shark so many times that it's just the same story over and over again. But the first one, especially with the first one, was pretty good. And I was watching one of the trailers of that, and it has Morgan Freeman in it. And Morgan Freeman said in a voice that only Morgan Freeman can say, he said, "What is about to happen will amaze." The exact quote was, "I believe what is about to follow is really going to amaze." The problem is this, though. We live in a world where amazement is really hard to come by. In a world of CGI and special effects and Photoshop and all this computer-generated stuff. I mean, we see things blow up and we see all these things. We're like, yeah, whatever. That's all right. No big deal. We have just become immune to what it is to be amazed. However, when I think about the Christmas story and all that it entails, I cannot help but be amazed at the things that take place. The writers of the New Testament, they actually use this terminology, this phrase, to describe it. In fact, in Luke chapter 2, it's the passage Pastor Emily read, we read, "All who heard the shepherd's story were astonished." The NIV actually translates it as amazed. A little bit later, when Jesus is just a few days old, he's taken to the temple, and his parents take him and they present him to this prophet and prophetess Anna and Simeon. And Simeon and Anna make these statements about this child, and his parents, we read in Luke chapter 2, say Jesus's parents were amazed at what was being said about him. What struck me as I began to work through this and to pray through this is this idea that unfortunately we run the risk at Christmas of simply becoming amused and not amazed at the story. I'm married to an English teacher, and the definitions of words matter. And so the definition of amused means to hold attention of someone pleasantly, to entertain or divert in an enjoyable or cheerful manner. The definition of amazed is something that is totally different, and it says to affect with great wonder, and we read synonyms or words that are similar like astonish, astound, surprise, stun, stagger, shock, awe, to stop someone in their tracks, to leave aghast, to take someone's breath away. The difference between amused and amazed are significant. And what I am afraid of is that in our world where amazement is hard to come by, what has happened is at Christmas, we have simply just become amused and not amazed with the story. Today is the Advent candle of joy, and Christmas is definitely a time of joy, of celebration, but the joy is not rooted in our being enamored with the lights and with the new technology and with the Christmas parties. And you just list all those things. And it's easy to become enamored by them, to maybe be entertained by them. But the amazement or the amazing part of the story is not in those. Holiday celebrations may amuse us, but worshiping the Christ of Christmas should amaze us. There's a lot of things about the Christmas story to be amazed at. The fact that Mary, this teenage girl, becomes pregnant without ever being with a man as a virgin. That's pretty amazing. That's a miracle that cannot really be explained. We should get that. The way that God spoke into the wise men and gave them insight to follow the star is something that's pretty impressive. The angels lighting up the night sky is not something I experience on a regular basis. That's pretty amazing. We all probably have something about the story that is amazing, but what I want to press in on today is that some of the most amazing things about the story are not about the things that physically happened at all. They're maybe even at a deeper level. You see, we should never lose the amazement that Christ became human. We should never lose the amazement that in the birth of Jesus, as recorded in Matthew, we read, all this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said to the prophet. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. The writer John writes, the Word, or God the Son, become flesh and made his dwelling among us. It's this theological word, a couple theological words that we use. One is incarnation or in the flesh. This idea that God the Son took on human flesh to experience humanity. That he dwelt among us, or some translations would say that he took up residence or he made his home with us. There is something about the incarnation. There is something about this supernatural, divine God the Son taking on flesh that should never stop amazing us. It reminds us that there would have been absolutely no way we could have connected to God, but God chose to connect with us. William Willimon, who's a pastor, author, reminds us that every religion offers the opportunity for the finite creatures to climb or to try to dig up to God, but only Christianity contends that God chose to descend to the finite. This idea should leave us amazed, not simply amused at the story. This idea moves God from this realm of knowing what it means to be human to having experienced what it means to be human. The writer of Hebrews talks about the fact that we have this high priest who understands our weaknesses because he has faced the same temptations and the struggles that we have faced. It means that God knows your pain, that God knows your sorrow because he has walked in flesh. Listen, that should always amaze us about the Christmas story. Should always amaze us. You see, he was willing to go to such effort because the story of God is a story of God who has been relentlessly going to extreme measures, whatever he had to do to reconcile God to him, to his people, to himself. He became flesh to do that. And he offers us forgiveness. He offers us mercy because he was so determined that he wanted to reconcile people to himself. Because the fall was so great. Our sin was so great. There was no way that we could reach him. And he descended into our finite world so he could reconnect us to the Father. And so he offers us grace, this thing we don't deserve, this mercy, this forgiveness that we don't deserve. He offers it to us free. It is a gift. It is this grace. We sing the song, most of us in this room, maybe not all of us, but most of us in this room know the song Amazing Grace. And we can never lose sight that this grace that he offers us that was really seen in some miraculous ways in the Christmas story is amazing. There's not a person in this room that does not need that. A few weeks ago, I went to the eye doctor just for like an annual checkup. I've never had to wear glasses. My eyes have always been great. And the eye doctor, he said something. I wasn't really happy with him, but he said, Tony, in a couple of years, you're going to have glasses. I don't know. He thinks I'm getting older. I don't know what his gig is, but for some reason, he thinks I'm going to have glasses. So me and Amy have had conversations about this whole wearing glasses thing. And supposedly, which it just kind of seems weird to me, but people who wear glasses sometimes forget, according to Amy, sometimes forget they actually are wearing them. That they become so used to seeing the world through them that they actually forget that they have them on. Maybe until they take them off. I wonder if for those of us, I'll just be honest and transparent, for those of us who have been Christians for so long, who have experienced God's grace and God's forgiveness and God's mercy, I wonder if we have become so accustomed to the grace that God has offered us that we have failed to become even amazed by it anymore. I mean, we have lived with it for so many years. We've experienced the mercy and don't we actually just deserve it? Don't we actually, by now, am I not good enough to actually have earned this? We have looked through our lives for so long through the lens of God's grace that we have failed to recognize how desperately we still need it. God help us. The story of God's grace should always amaze us. The story that God would offer me grace, should never be something that I lose that amazement for. But I should always be reminded of my desperate need for it. If we are just amused by the Christmas story, I think it might be possible to miss the amazement of the grace that is offered. But I need it every day. In the book, The Pursuit of Holiness, the author says, your worst days are never so bad that you're beyond the reach of God's grace, and your best days are never so good that you're beyond the need of God's grace. So God has been working. He so wanted to connect his people with God the Father to reconcile them, that he becomes flesh to pursue us. But he continues to pursue us. He continues to desire for his plan to be unfolded within our lives, for us to walk in obedience, to live for him. The story of Christmas should amaze us because it is a story of a culmination of God's plan that had been at work since the beginning of time. It's a story of God's awesome plan coming to kind of that moment that had been working there. But I got to thinking, actually, because I listened to a podcast of Kevin Myers, who is the pastor of the largest Wesleyan church in our denomination. It's in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was listening to a podcast this week, and he reminded me that for God's plan to have worked, there was a bunch of other people whose plans on the surface really got messed up. I mean, think about that. I mean, it was not in Joseph's plan to discover that his teenage fiance, who he had never been with, he is innocent, is expecting a child. Talking about getting your plans messed with, that's a mess with your plan moment right there. I'm sure the wise men actually had other things that were sort of on the docket for those months and years that it took to get to where the Christ child was. Whatever those plans were, they are sort of put on hold. What I think I begin to understand is that God is working out his plan for us. It is a big plan that he is working. He is wanting to move in our lives, to do things we can't even see, things we don't understand, things that we don't even really like. It's a big plan. It's an amazing plan. But sometimes our immediate plans get messed with pretty bad. But that doesn't mean he's still not working, that he's still not doing his thing. What we have to get to the point is we have to say, God, I am going to walk in obedience. I'm going to do what you call me to do. I'm going to follow what you have for me. Even if the surface I don't get, because I know your fingerprint is on what you're doing in my life so much. They have handwriting experts, if you watch enough TV shows, that they actually come in and they can look at handwriting and determine, supposedly, at least on CSI, I don't know, that whose handwriting it is. If you look at the Christmas story, God's handwriting is all over it. There is no denying it. When you look at your story, God's handwriting is all over it. That should never stop to amaze us. Christmas story is an amazing story that's not simply meant to amuse us or to entertain us. It is meant to draw us to this place where we are awestruck, where we are dumbfounded, where we worship God, where we simply have no words to express what he is doing in us. Because he has pursued us, he has become flesh, and we should always be amazed. This amazement will not, before I go on, I want to add one more thing. Sometimes our plans sometimes I need word image to help me with this. Sometimes our plans are like a kid who has a toy that falls off the table and is broken into a million pieces. But they pick it up and it's no longer valuable for what they want it for. It doesn't work for whatever it was it did really awesome. But they just hang on to it. I mean, maybe someone will come along beside them and say, hey, can I look at that? Maybe I can fix it. Maybe I can maybe I can glue it, or maybe we can go to the store and get another one. But they have become so attached to this toy that even in the broken state, they hold on to it. Sometimes in our broken state, we hang on to the plans that we have for ourselves so long that we will not give them to God and let him work out his best plan for us. So like the kid with the toy, we just grab it and not let go. So we have to surrender that to God. You know, as I begin to process this, I was reminded that when we become amazed by the Christmas story, we will quickly move from being spectators to participants. I look at the shepherds. I mean, they see the angels. They like, oh, okay, let's go find the kid. They come to him. They worship him. I don't know. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but if they would have had an iPhone, we're taking selfies. This was the moment. And then they left, and they absolutely had to tell everyone that they came in contact with what they had just experienced. When we become really amazed by the story, we will stop being spectators in the Christmas story, and we will become participants. When we are really, once again, amazed that we have received grace, we will not be able to stop from telling other people that they can experience the same grace as well. Can I just be honest with you? Do you know who the best people are at telling others about Jesus Christ and leading them to Christ? It's people who have just recently come to know him. They've recently come to know him, and they're like, wow, this totally changed my life. I have friends that need to know this. And they go and they do it. Because they're still amazed. For those of us, can I just say, for those of us who have been followers of Jesus Christ for a while, let's be reminded of that again. We don't have to not be amazed and not tell people. We have the opportunity to tell people what God can do for them. This Christmas season, there is no better time to tell people the hope that's found in Jesus Christ, that God can change their life. Maybe not circumstances all at once. Maybe not everything go great. God is so redeem them, so heal the brokenness, so work through their life, and we get to tell them, why would we not? When the story amazes us, when we have experienced that grace and have been reminded of our need for it, when we have been reminded that God became flesh, why would we not tell everyone we possibly can what God will do in their life? When I've experienced things that have blown me away, I will tell people about them. You cannot talk to me very long, just in one-on-one conversations, without knowing that I absolutely love hiking in the mountains. I will tell you over and over again if I get the chance. I've mentioned it in more than one sermon, as by now you all know, because it is something that has been very formative in my life. When we become amazed by the Christmas story and not just amused, not just entertained, not just caught up in all that is part of the Christmas season, but when we become this deeply amazed individual about the story of Christmas, you can bet we're going to tell about it. And we're going to worship God with everything that we have. We will not be able to not. Look at the shepherds. They went around, told everybody, and the scripture says they went back glorifying God. They were so awestruck and they were so amazed. Amusement will make us become consumers, even in church. Amusement will make us become just here for the ride. just here to get what we like, to become spectators, but amazement will make us participants who worship God with everything that we have. In this Christmas season, it is my prayer. It is my prayer for me. I so want to be lit with this amazement in my life that is not based upon just amusement with the season, but with amazement in what God has done. I want to worship him with everything I have. I want to tell everyone about it. That Christ, that God, the Son, became flesh, took on flesh to pursue me relentlessly. We're going to come and we're just going to close in a worship song, and I want to pray. Stand with me. God, as we worship you, God, remind us this year. God, help us to be amazed. God, we are tired of simply being amused by the story. God, help us to be amazed by God the Son becoming flesh, by the fact that you have pursued us with the grace that we all need. God, may we worship you with everything we have. In Jesus' name.